Absolutely. So, next big story. This is something, if you live in the city of Houston or if you live in any major city across the country, it's talking about crime. So, violent crime actually is down to some of the lowest numbers since the FBI started tracking those numbers back in 1936, so 90 years ago. And it's interesting. Houston, Dallas, there are a couple of other Texas cities too, where the numbers even have either held steady or gone down a little bit. Looking at the first quarter of last year compared to this year, so we had interviewed with Crime Stoppers of Houston, Andy Kahan. So let's go and take a listen to what he had to say. Me tonight is Andy Kahan, and Andy, talking about crime statistics across the country and even here in Harris County and in Houston as well. Specifically Houston. Last week on Friday, the FBI released data showing that there was a large decrease in crimes nationwide. I guess kind of looking at the big picture, what's your initial thought with hearing that?
It's rare that I get a chance to actually smile a bit, but the fact that we've had a major reduction of crime, particularly violent crime, and that's kind of what Crime Stoppers focuses on in a 1-year period, gives me a lot of hope. And it's significant. The fact that it's been 90 years since we've had this low crime rate in the country. That's remarkable.
And and it's so funny because I think a lot of times people get caught in the headlines about death, destruction, what have you, and not just here in Houston, just
in news, it bleeds, it leads. I mean, that's pretty much what the first few minutes of the news is, the crime of the day. So yeah, we get inundated with that and we think we've got major crime problems. And trust me, Houston had major crime issues between 2020 and 2024. But I'm going to tell you, one of the reasons that I know that our homicide rates have dropped dramatically, and that's our Breaking Bond series. We've been doing Breaking Bond for 6 years. And I'd say for the first 4 years, the shows that we did were predominantly focused on individuals who were released on multiple bonds. Very rarely do Randy Wallace and I ever do a Breaking Bond in the last year plus on an individual charged with murder who's been released on multiple bonds or a PR bond. So a lot of legislation, and you got to give credit where credit is due, and you can't say it's one thing, but I do think the bills that we got passed to reduce the revolving door at the courthouse has made a significant difference in the reduction of violent crime and particularly murder. Individuals who are routinely getting out on a personal recognizance, get out of jail free card, no matter what they were charged with, and that includes violent crimes, that doesn't happen anymore. Judges are more cognizant of the bonds that they're giving. We're seeing higher bonds than we've ever seen, and I've been doing this for a long time, in decades. That's as a result of the attention that we've brought to this issue. So we also had a constitutional amendment that was overwhelmingly passed by Texas voters, and our district attorney's office is using that religiously to request no bond on defendants, not just charged with capital murder like they used to, but we're charged with murder, ag robbery, sexual assaults, and other violent crimes. That has played a significant role in the drop in crime in Houston from my perspective.
And and Andy, it's interesting when you talk about that too, because before we started taping and everything, we were talking about Houston specifically, and we were talking about the drop in homicides for the first quarter of 2025 to the drop that's happened earlier this year. So just to put in the context, so in the first 3 months of 2025, there were 77 homicide cases in the city of Houston. This year, fast forward a year, it went from 77 down to 49, which is, that's almost 30.
That is so significant. And you compare it to other large major cities of population of proportionate to Houston. For example, Chicago has double the amount of homicides during the same period. I think if you looked at all the other cities right there, there's no other city in the country that has had such a dramatic decrease in homicide rates during that time period.
And and it's funny because I have it pulled up next to me and I'm scrolling through it, and you're right. I feel like that the number that Houston had with the drop was remarkable. And it wasn't just homicides either. I mean, if you look at the rape, the violent crime survey with the rapes, that was down from 371 in 2025, the first quarter of it, to 260 in the same time frame this year. Robberies were down from just over 1,300 to just shy of 900 this year. And also aggravated assaults a little bit closer, but still down nonetheless. So when you look at these statistics, you see the trend is going down in all the violent crime categories that are being reported in this survey.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, keep in mind that we reached all-time highs in those numbers in 21 and 22 and even part of 2023. So realistically, we had nowhere else to go but down. And I do want to say one thing about the homicide rates that very few people talk about. One of the reasons that you have a reduction of homicide is medical technology. And I'll tell you why. 10 years ago, people that would have normally died of wounds that they had from shotguns or other types of weapons are now being kept alive by our medical professionals. So the medical professionals deserve a little bit of credit in this. They don't get credit, but medical technology has saved lives that ordinarily would have been classified as homicides as well.
Definitely very interesting to hear. I guess, okay, so I live in the city, I live in the inner loop. To me, when I see these numbers, that's important to me as a person living in the city, not just a person who's covering it. What would you want to say to people if they're like, all right, maybe I'll feel a little bit more safe walking my dogs at night or going on a walk through the bayou, like Buffalo Bayou or Eleanor Tinsley Park or what have you? What would you want to say to the people who maybe were concerned about going out? Now, maybe should they feel a little bit better about going outside?
I do think they should feel better about it. And keep in mind, homicide, for the most part, statistically, is a personal crime. If you broke them down by homicides versus someone you knew versus random stranger on stranger, the numbers would be dramatically different as well. Unfortunately, you do have hot pocket spots like the Third Ward whose numbers have increased. And that kind of balances off the areas of town where the numbers have decreased. But I'm hoping that we continue to see this trend and we continue to have a safer city. So kudos to law enforcement, kudos to all the community organizations that are working hand in hand, and kudos to organizations, and I'll give a thumbs up for Crime Stoppers for continuing to, keep an eye on what's happening on crime rates and identifying them as well. And I hope this upcoming legislative session, you'll see additional laws that are passed that get tougher on repeat offenders, because that's what we were seeing in the previous years. And that's pretty much has ended. The revolving door at the courthouse that led to the surge in criminal activity, particularly violent crime in Harris County, has pretty much been nullified.
Very good. Well, Andy, as always, I appreciate you for coming on to the show, and we look forward to having you on the next time we have you on the show.
You bet. All right. Peace out.
Awesome. Peace out. Thank you. All right. Some good information right there. One of the things I do want to say, just to kind of put it into context. So I know that Andy had mentioned that Chicago had almost double the numbers, which is accurate. They had, I think, 98 homicides during the same time period in the first quarter. Houston had a huge drop. I would argue to say out of all the major cities, according to the report, it had one of the largest drops of homicides in the entire country.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to keep in mind, though, is there were still more murder or homicides that were reported in the city of Houston than Los Angeles. And there were also more that were reported in Houston versus the city of New York. So the reason why I want to bring that out is because, yeah, Chicago, 100% accurate and everything. And it's still accurate with everything else that was reported. But I know a lot of times people will be like, oh, New York City or oh, LA or oh, this. Like Houston still has work that needs to be done. But on a good positive note, though, Houston is trending in the right way. It's going down. So kudos to what's being done here in the city of Houston. And I'm curious to hear, and I know that you have it on the lower third, is what do people think? I mean, do people feel safer? Do people feel fine walking around, or are they still concerned?
Like personally, I hear the numbers, I hear that crime is going down, is on the decline, but honestly, I don't feel safer. I don't feel safe. You know, and maybe because I also work in at a news station. like we always get these reports about crime and someone getting robbed or attacked or something, or social media. I'm always seeing videos on social media of someone getting their ass kicked.
You need to change your algorithm, Keyshawn. You need to change that algorithm.
So I don't feel safe. Like I'm always, my head is on a swivel when I go out. Like I'm always looking for the exit.
Yeah, no, that's smart though. And you know, Dolores put on Facebook saying the more cameras, the lower the crime. And you know, it's interesting because we've talked a lot about the flock cameras. We've talked a lot about the different cameras across the city, and I'm really curious to see if there's any correlation between the two of them. I don't obviously have the information, but that's something I think would be a good follow-up story for the Isiah Factor Uncensored Primetime Live. So
wink, wink.
Wink, wink.
Yeah. And I mean, with the camera situation, I know that's also a controversial thing as well. Yeah. And as far as feeling safer, I don't know. Like I'm always about just staying vigilant. Like literally earlier today before I came in, I was looking at getting a different dog harness that like lights up at night. Since I walk my dog at night. I'm just like I'm always just like thinking, I'm looking over my shoulder. I don't want to get comfortable because you never know. Yep. You never know. You can be anywhere in any part of the city and anything could happen at any time.
Let's be real too. How many stories do we see where it's in some podunk small ass town where they have somebody who gets shot or what have you? I mean, I just remember growing up, and kind of the both of your guys' points is the simple fact of keep your head on the swivel, just be aware of your surroundings, know where your exits are, know what you need to do in case of an emergency. And I mean, I also go into my everyday life of I'm going to control what I can, and what I can't control, so be it. I mean, but that's not always fair, because it's not always the case for everybody.
Right. And another thing that Andy pointed out in your conversation with him is that technology in at hospitals and doctors have improved a lot in the past few years, that we are able to save lives, which is a good thing. I never thought of it like that. I never thought of, let's give a little shout out to the doctors and our medical professionals for helping saving lives, more lives, and technology these days are better. If someone gets shot, it's not always a death sentence. You may survive.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Well, interesting topic. Definitely, like I said, good trend, and we'll see what happens, I guess, throughout the rest of the year.
Yep, we will.
All right, guys, you ready for some spicy tea?
Yeah, let's get